The winter wind cut through the Afghan mountains like a blade, but Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell barely felt it. She was too focused on the radio transmission crackling in her ear. Her team of Navy SEALs had been on reconnaissance for 3 days now, tracking a high-value target through the treacherous terrain. Christmas was just 2 weeks away, and Sarah had promised her daughter Emma that she would be home this time. She had missed the last 2 Christmases, and the guilt weighed heavier than her tactical vest. Sarah had joined the Navy at 19, determined to prove that women could stand shoulder to shoulder with men in combat. 12 years later, she was one of the few female operators attached to SEAL Team 7. Her expertise in intelligence and sharpshooting had earned her respect, but it had also cost her dearly. Her marriage had ended 3 years ago, and her ex-husband now lived in Ohio with Emma. The arrangement was simple. Sarah got Emma for Christmas, and he got her for summer. This year, Sarah had specifically requested leave to coincide with the holidays. The mission was supposed to be simple: observe and report on the movements of a Taliban commander known as the Wolf. Intelligence suggested he was planning a major attack on a coalition base, and Sarah's team was tasked with gathering information to prevent it. But nothing in war was ever simple. Sarah crouched behind a rocky outcrop, her sniper rifle resting on its bipod. Through her scope, she watched a compound nestled in the valley below. Smoke rose from its chimney, and armed men patrolled the perimeter. Her spotter, Petty Officer Jake Rodriguez, lay beside her with his own scope. "Count 7 tangos on the outside," Jake whispered. "Probably more inside." Sarah nodded, adjusting her scope. The rest of their 8-man team was positioned around the valley, each member providing security and intelligence from different vantage points. Their leader, Commander Tom Brennan, was a veteran with 20 years of experience. He trusted Sarah implicitly, and she had never let him down. "Overwatch, this is Eagle 1. Tom's voice came through her earpiece. "Target confirmed inside the compound. Positive ID on the Wolf." Sarah's heart rate increased slightly. This was it. They had found him. But the rules of engagement were clear: observe only. No shots fired unless absolutely necessary. They would relay the coordinates to command, and an airstrike would neutralize the target. "Copy that, Eagle 1, Sarah responded. Maintaining position. The hours dragged on. Sarah remained perfectly still, a skill she had mastered over countless missions. Her mind wandered briefly to Emma. The last video call they had shared replayed in her memory. Emma had shown her the Christmas list she had written, decorated with hand-drawn snowflakes and reindeer. At the top of the list, in careful 9-year-old handwriting, was "Mom home for Christmas." Sarah blinked away the emotion threatening to surface. She couldn't afford distractions. Not here. Not now. As dusk began to fall, movement in the compound increased. Vehicles arrived, and more men gathered. Sarah counted at least 20 fighters now, all heavily armed. Something big was happening. "Eagle 1, we've got increased activity," Sarah reported. "Looks like a meeting. Copy, Overwatch. Keep eyes on." Then, Sarah saw him through her scope. The Wolf. He emerged from the main building, flanked by bodyguards. Even from this distance, Sarah could see the distinctive scar running down his left cheek. He was gesturing animatedly, clearly giving orders. Suddenly, the radio crackled with urgency. "Eagle 1, we've got movement on the ridge. We're being flanked." Sarah's blood ran cold. She swung her rifle around, scanning the area. Through her scope, she spotted them. At least a dozen Taliban fighters moving through the rocks, heading directly toward their team's position. They had been compromised. "All units, we are compromised. Execute extraction protocol Charlie," Tom commanded, his voice steady despite the crisis. Sarah knew protocol Charlie. It meant fighting their way out. The nearest extraction point was 3 miles away, through hostile territory. They had to move fast. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions. Sarah squeezed her trigger, dropping the first enemy fighter who had a clear line of sight on her teammates. Jake was already packing their gear. They had to move. "Overwatch, this is Eagle 3, we're pinned down on the East Ridge." The voice belonged to Petty Officer Marcus Webb, one of their youngest team members. Sarah made a split-second decision. "Eagle 1, I can provide cover from here. I have the high ground." "Negative, Overwatch. Fall back with your spotter," Tom ordered. But Sarah could see what Tom couldn't. From her position, she had a clear view of the entire valley. If she stayed, she could cover the team's retreat. If she left, they would be sitting ducks. "Let me," Sarah shouted into the radio, using the phrase that had become her unofficial call sign after countless missions where she volunteered for the most dangerous tasks. "I can hold this position. Get the team out." There was a brief pause. Tom knew Sarah well enough to understand she wouldn't make this call lightly. "Jake, fall back to the rally point," Sarah ordered her spotter. "I've got this." Jake hesitated, conflict written across his face. "Sarah, you can't hold this alone." "That's an order, petty officer. Move." Reluctantly, Jake gathered their equipment and began his descent down the backside of the ridge. Sarah adjusted her position, settling in behind the rocks. She had a full magazine, 2 spares, and her sidearm. It would have to be enough. Through her scope, she began identifying targets. The first priority was the fighters closing in on Marcus's position. She took a breath, let it out halfway, and squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder, and 800 yards away, a Taliban fighter dropped. Sarah worked the bolt action, chambering another round. She fired again, and again. Each shot was precise, calculated. She was buying time, buying distance for her team. The enemy fighters began to realize someone was picking them off from above. Bullets started impacting around Sarah's position, sending rock fragments flying. She ignored them, focusing on her breathing, her sight picture, her trigger squeeze. "Overwatch, Eagle 3 is mobile. Good shooting." Marcus's grateful voice came through her earpiece. Sarah allowed herself a thin smile. But the smile faded as she realized the full extent of their situation. More fighters were pouring out of the compound. They were organizing, preparing to pursue the retreating SEAL team. "Eagle 1, you've got approximately 30 tangos preparing to follow your extraction route," Sarah reported, her voice calm despite the chaos. Tom's response was grim. "Copy that. Can you slow them down?" Sarah's eyes narrowed as she surveyed the valley through her scope. There was a narrow pass that the pursuers would have to funnel through. If she could hold that choke point, even for a few minutes, it might give her team the head start they needed. "Affirmative," she replied. "But I'll need to displace to a new position." What Sarah didn't say was that the new position would put her directly in the enemy's path. She would be completely cut off from any support, with no clear extraction route of her own. It was a suicide mission, and they both knew it. "Overwatch." Tom's voice carried a weight of unspoken understanding. He knew what she was doing. "Don't do anything stupid." "Too late for that, sir," Sarah responded with dark humor. "I signed up for the Navy." She quickly broke down her position, slinging the rifle across her back. The descent from her perch was treacherous in the fading light, but Sarah moved with practiced efficiency. She had perhaps 10 minutes before the enemy reached the pass. It would have to be enough. Her boots hit loose scree, and she nearly lost her footing. Sarah caught herself, breathing hard. The adrenaline was pumping now, sharpening her senses. Every sound, every shadow became significant. She reached the pass and immediately identified a defensive position. A cluster of large boulders provided cover and a clear field of fire. Sarah dropped into position, checking her ammunition. 23 rounds in her current magazine. 2 full magazines remaining. Her sidearm had 15 rounds. The mathematics of combat were brutal and simple. She was one person against approximately 30 trained fighters. The odds were impossible, but Sarah had never been good at accepting what was impossible. Through her scope, she saw the first group of fighters entering the pass. They moved cautiously, weapons raised. They knew there was a sniper somewhere, but they didn't know where. Sarah waited. Patience was as much a weapon as her rifle. She let them advance deeper into the pass, where their numbers would work against them, where there was no room to maneuver. When the lead fighter was 200 yards away, Sarah fired. The shot echoed off the canyon walls, and the man fell. Immediately, chaos erupted. The fighters scattered, seeking cover, returning fire in her general direction. Sarah had already moved, shifting to a new position within her cluster of boulders. She fired again, then again. 2 more fighters down. The others were pinned, unable to advance without exposing themselves to her fire. Minutes stretched like hours. Sarah's world narrowed to the view through her scope, the rhythm of her breathing, the smooth pull of the trigger. She was a machine, calculating angles and distances, predicting movement. But she was also human, and the enemy was learning. They began to coordinate, laying down suppressive fire while others attempted to flank her position. Sarah dropped one of the flankers, but another made it to cover closer to her position. A bullet struck the rock inches from her head, showering her with stone fragments. Sarah felt a sharp pain across her cheek, the warm trickle of blood. She ignored it, adjusting her aim. Her radio crackled. Overwatch, Eagle 1. We've reached the extraction point. Exfil bird is inbound. ETA 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Sarah just had to hold for 10 more minutes. Copy, Eagle 1. She responded, her voice steady despite the situation. Happy to help. But, even as she spoke, Sarah knew the truth. The enemy was too close now. They would overrun her position before the 10 minutes were up. She had done what she set out to do. Her team was safe. That would have to be enough. Sarah thought of Emma, of the promise she had made. I'll be home for Christmas, baby. I promise. It was a promise she might not be able to keep. Sarah fired another shot, watching through her scope as a Taliban fighter attempting to advance fell backwards. Her shoulder ached from the rifle's repeated recoil, and her fingers were starting to go numb from the cold. The sun had fully set now, and the temperature in the Afghan mountains was dropping rapidly. She could see her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. The enemy had stopped their direct assault, but Sarah knew this wasn't good news. They were regrouping, planning. She had maybe 5 minutes before they tried again with better tactics. She checked her ammunition. 8 rounds left in her current magazine. 2 full magazines. Not enough. Through her night vision scope, Sarah scanned the area. The fighters had spread out, taking covered positions. They were preparing for a coordinated assault from multiple angles. Professional tactics. These weren't just village fighters. They were trained soldiers. Overwatch, what's your status? Tom's voice cut through the static. Sarah hesitated before responding. She could lie, tell him she was fine, that she had a clear exit route. But Tom deserved the truth. Surrounded on 3 sides, Eagle 1. Ammunition critical. I'm not making it to the extraction point. There was a long pause. When Tom spoke again, his voice was tight with controlled emotion. We're not leaving you behind, Mitchell. Hold position. We're coming back. Negative. Sarah's response was sharp, immediate. You have 7 men and 1 of me. You don't risk 7 for 1. That's not how this works. Sarah, that's an order, Commander, she said, pulling rank even though Tom technically outranked her in this operation. Complete the extraction. Tell Emma. Sarah's voice caught slightly. Tell Emma I tried. Tell her mommy loves her. Before Tom could respond, Sarah switched off her radio. She couldn't afford the distraction, couldn't afford to hear her team argue about coming back for her. They had their mission. She had hers. Movement caught her eye. The fighters were advancing again, using the darkness and their superior numbers. Sarah dropped one, then another. But for every one she took down, 2 more seemed to appear. They were closing the noose. A grenade exploded 20 feet to her left, the concussion wave slamming into her even behind cover. Sarah's ears rang, and dust filled her lungs. She blinked away tears, trying to clear her vision. Another grenade landed closer. She was out of time. Sarah made a decision born of desperation and tactical necessity. She couldn't hold this position, but maybe she could lead them away from her team's extraction route. If she moved deeper into the mountains, drew the pursuit after her, it would give the SEALs a clean exfil. Slinging her rifle across her back, Sarah grabbed her remaining magazines and broke from cover. Bullets chased her across the rocky ground. She ran in a crouch, using every depression and boulder for cover. Behind her, she heard shouts in Pashto as the fighters realized their target was escaping. The terrain grew more treacherous as Sarah climbed higher into the mountains. The moon provided just enough light to see by, but it also made her more visible to her pursuers. She could hear them behind her, closer than she would have liked. They were younger, fresher, and they knew this terrain better than she did. Sarah's lungs burned with each breath. The altitude and exertion were taking their toll. She had been operating for 3 days on minimal sleep and rations. Adrenaline could only carry her so far. A shot rang out, and Sarah felt a burning sensation across her left arm. She had been hit. Not deep, but enough to draw blood and limit her movement. She pressed on, ignoring the pain. The mountain path narrowed, becoming little more than a ledge carved into the rock face. To Sarah's right was a sheer drop of at least 100 feet. To her left, the rock wall rose straight up. Behind her, the sounds of pursuit grew louder. She was trapped. The ledge ended 50 feet ahead at what looked like a cave entrance. It was either make a stand there or take her chances with the drop. Sarah chose the cave. Ducking inside, Sarah immediately assessed her new position. The cave was shallow, maybe 30 feet deep, with no other exits. It was a dead end in every sense of the phrase. But it also created a perfect defensive choke point. Only 1 or 2 men could come through the entrance at a time. Sarah positioned herself behind a natural rock formation inside the cave, her rifle trained on the entrance. Her left arm throbbed, and she could feel blood soaking through her sleeve. She tore a strip from her undershirt and quickly bound the wound. It wasn't pretty, but it would slow the bleeding. Minutes passed. Sarah heard voices outside, arguing in Pashto. They knew she was trapped in the cave. They were deciding how to proceed. Rush her and take casualties, or wait her out until her ammunition ran dry or hypothermia set in. A figure appeared at the cave entrance, silhouetted against the moonlight. Sarah didn't hesitate. She fired, and the figure fell. Immediately, automatic weapons fire tore through the cave opening, ricocheting off the rocks. Sarah pressed herself flat against the cave floor, feeling the supersonic crack of bullets passing overhead. When the firing stopped, Sarah remained still, controlling her breathing. She was down to her last magazine now, plus her sidearm. Maybe 40 rounds total. Against how many? 20 fighters? 15? The math didn't matter. It was more than she had bullets for. Her thoughts drifted to Emma again. By now, her daughter would be in school, probably sitting in Mrs. Henderson's 3rd-grade class. Did Emma know her mother was in danger? No, of course not. The Navy wouldn't notify family until it was over. One way or another. Sarah remembered the last time she had held Emma. It was at the airport, before this deployment. Emma had clung to her, crying, begging her not to go. Sarah had promised it would be okay, that she would be back before Emma knew it. Another promise she might not keep. A sound at the cave entrance snapped Sarah back to the present. A small object bounced across the cave floor, trailing smoke. Grenade. Sarah had maybe 2 seconds. She dove deeper into the cave, pressing herself into a small depression in the rock. The explosion was deafening in the confined space. Shrapnel whistled overhead, and the concussion felt like a physical blow. Sarah's ears rang so loudly she couldn't hear anything else. Dust and smoke filled the cave, choking her. Through the haze, shapes moved at the entrance. The fighters were coming in, using the grenade's aftermath as cover. Sarah raised her rifle, but her vision was blurred, her hands shaking from the concussion. She fired twice, not sure if she hit anything. Then, her rifle clicked empty. She had lost count of her shots. Sarah dropped the rifle and drew her sidearm, a Sig Sauer P226. 15 rounds. She would make them count. 2 fighters rushed through the smoke. Sarah fired 4 times in rapid succession. Both men fell, but more were coming. Sarah could see their shadows through the dissipating smoke. She fired again and again. Each shot found its target, but there were too many. Her slide locked back. Empty. Sarah performed a tactical reload, her hands moving on muscle memory despite her injuries and exhaustion. A fighter made it through, raising his AK-47. Sarah was faster. 2 shots center mass, and he went down. But his momentum carried him forward, and he crashed into Sarah, knocking her backwards. The impact drove the air from her lungs, and her pistol skittered across the cave floor. Sarah rolled, gasping for breath, scrambling for her weapon. Her hand closed around the grip just as another fighter entered the cave. She brought the pistol up, but he was already firing. Sarah felt a sledgehammer blow to her chest. Her body armor had caught the round, but the impact was devastating. She fired from the ground, hitting the fighter in the leg. He went down screaming. Sarah forced herself to her feet, her chest feeling like someone had driven a steel spike through her ribs. Definitely cracked ribs, possibly broken. The cave entrance was temporarily clear. The fighters had pulled back after losing several men. They were reassessing. Sarah used the reprieve to check her ammunition. 5 rounds left in her pistol. 1 spare magazine. 20 rounds total. She retrieved her rifle and checked it for damage. The scope was cracked, and the stock was splintered, but it would still fire. Sarah found her remaining rifle magazine and loaded it. 23 rounds. Combined with her pistol, she had 43 rounds left. 43 rounds against an unknown number of enemy fighters. The odds were beyond impossible now. They were mathematical certainty. Sarah was going to die in this cave. She thought about her options. She could save the last round for herself. Many operators carried a final round for exactly this purpose. Capture was not an option. The Taliban's treatment of captured soldiers, especially women, was well documented and horrific. But Sarah wasn't ready to give up yet. As long as she had ammunition and breath in her lungs, she would fight. It was what she had trained for, what she had sworn to do. Her radio crackled to life. She had thought she'd turned it off, but apparently the battery had just died and now was receiving passive transmission. Overwatch, this is Eagle 1. If you can hear me, we've secured the HLZ. The bird is taking the team out, but I'm staying. I'm coming for you. Give me a signal if you're alive. Tom. Stubborn, loyal Tom. He should be on that helicopter. But, of course he wasn't. He was coming back for her. And he would die trying. Sarah keyed her radio, using the last of its battery. Eagle 1, do not approach my position. Multiple hostiles. I repeat, do not approach. Complete the extraction. That's my final order. Static was her only answer. The radio was dead. Outside the cave, she heard the distinctive sound of a helicopter in the distance. The extraction bird. It was leaving, taking her team to safety. The sound was the sweetest thing Sarah had heard in hours. They had made it. Whatever happened to her now, her team was safe. The helicopter sound faded, and silence descended over the mountain. Sarah could hear the wind whistling across the rocks, could hear the shuffle of boots as the fighters regrouped outside. They were preparing for another assault. Sarah checked her weapons one more time, wincing as the movement aggravated her cracked ribs. Her left arm was still bleeding, though the makeshift bandage had slowed it. She was running on fumes now, adrenaline and training the only things keeping her functional. The night wore on. The fighters didn't rush again. They had learned that lesson. Instead, they were patient. They knew Sarah couldn't leave, couldn't call for help. Tom was on their side. As the hours passed, the cold became as much an enemy as the men outside. Sarah's fingers were numb, and she was starting to shiver uncontrollably. Hypothermia was setting in. Combined with blood loss and exhaustion, it was only a matter of time before her body simply shut down. She thought about writing a letter to Emma, but she had nothing to write with. Instead, she spoke softly into the darkness, as if her daughter could somehow hear her across the thousands of miles. I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry I won't make it home for Christmas. I wanted to be there. I wanted to see you open your presents, to make hot chocolate together, to watch all those Christmas movies you love. I wanted all of that. Sarah's voice cracked. But I need you to know something. What I'm doing here, it matters. I'm keeping bad people from hurting good people. I'm making sure other little girls don't lose their mommies and daddies. And I need you to be strong, Emma. Stronger than me. Live a good life. Be happy. That's all I want. A tear rolled down Sarah's cheek, freezing in the cold air. The first light of dawn crept into the cave, casting long shadows across the rocky floor. Sarah had survived the night, though barely. Her body was shutting down from hypothermia, blood loss, and exhaustion. She had lapsed in and out of consciousness several times, jerking awake each time with her finger on the trigger, expecting the final assault that never came. The fighters outside had maintained their perimeter but hadn't attacked again. Sarah couldn't figure out why until voices drifted into the cave. They were arguing. Through her fragmented understanding of Pashto, picked up over multiple deployments, Sarah caught enough to understand. They wanted her alive. A captured American female soldier would be a massive propaganda victory. They were waiting for her to pass out from her injuries to make capture easier. Sarah's jaw tightened. That couldn't happen. She checked her pistol again. 19 rounds remaining. She had used more than she thought during the night's fighting. It would have to be enough. Her mind felt foggy, thoughts moving through mud. Blood loss and hypothermia were affecting her cognition. Sarah forced herself to focus, to stay alert. She started doing mental math problems, reciting the names of everyone in her daughter's third-grade class, anything to keep her brain functioning. The sun climbed higher, and with it came a small measure of warmth. Not enough to offset the hypothermia, but enough that Sarah stopped shivering quite so violently. She could see the cave entrance clearly now. The blood stains where the fighters had fallen, the scorch marks from the grenade, the spent brass casings from her own weapons. Movement at the entrance. Sarah raised her pistol, but it wasn't an attacker. Someone was waving a white cloth, calling out in accented English. "American soldier. We want to talk." Sarah didn't respond. It was a trick, had to be. But the voice continued. "You are injured. You need medical help. Surrender now. We will treat your wounds. You have my word." The word of a Taliban fighter. Worth less than the dirt under Sarah's boots. She had seen what they did to prisoners. There were fates worse than death, and capture was one of them. "We know you are a woman soldier," the voice continued. "Very brave. Very foolish. Your people have abandoned you. No help is coming. You will die in that cave unless you surrender." Sarah's throat was too dry to speak, but she managed to croak out a response. "Come and get me." There was laughter from outside. "We have time. You do not. Think about it, American. You have family, children. You want to see them again, yes? Surrender, and maybe you go home." Emma's face flashed through Sarah's mind. The hope in her eyes when Sarah had promised to be home for Christmas. But Sarah knew the truth. If she surrendered, she would never see Emma again. She would disappear into some black site prison, or worse, be paraded on propaganda videos before being executed. No, better to die fighting. The day wore on. Sarah's water had run out hours ago. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. Every breath sent lightning bolts of pain through her broken ribs. The wound on her arm had stopped bleeding, but infection was already setting in. She could feel the fever building. She must have passed out again because suddenly, it was afternoon, the sun slanting into the cave at a different angle. Sarah jerked awake, disoriented. How long had she been out? Minutes? Hours? Voices outside, more urgent now. Something had changed. Sarah strained to hear. Helicopter sounds, distant but growing closer. Not the same helicopter from last night. This was different. Multiple birds, by the sound of it. The fighters outside were panicking, shouting orders. Some were leaving, falling back down the mountain. Others were staying, determined to either kill or capture Sarah before whatever was coming arrived. Sarah understood then. Tom hadn't left. He had called in reinforcements. The stubborn bastard was coming back with everything he could muster. The helicopter sounds grew louder, and then Sarah heard the most beautiful sound in the world, the distinct thump of American rotor blades. Attack helicopters. They were making gun runs on the fighters' positions. Explosions echoed across the mountain as the attack helicopters engaged. The sounds of war that had haunted Sarah's nightmares for years now sounded like salvation. She tried to move, to position herself near the cave entrance, but her body wouldn't cooperate. She had been still for too long, and the cold had stiffened her joints. Gunfire erupted right outside the cave. Close quarters combat. American voices shouting tactical commands. The rescue team was here. A figure appeared in the cave entrance, and Sarah's training took over. She raised her pistol, finger on the trigger, before recognition stopped her. Tom. It was Tom, with 3 other SEALs behind him. "Don't shoot, Mitchell." "Friendlies," Tom called out, his weapon raised but pointed safely away. Sarah tried to lower her pistol, but her hands wouldn't work properly. Tom crossed the cave in 3 strides, gently taking the weapon from her frozen fingers. "Jesus, Sarah," he breathed, taking in her condition. "You look like hell." "Should see the other guys," Sarah managed, her voice a broken whisper. Tom was already on his radio. "Overwatch secure. We need immediate medevac. Soldier down, multiple GSWs, hypothermia, possible internal injuries. Get that bird in here now." Hands were on Sarah, checking her wounds, wrapping her in thermal blankets. Someone started in 4-line. The pain was overwhelming now that she wasn't fighting it anymore. Sarah felt herself slipping away, but Tom's voice anchored her. "Stay with me, Mitchell. You don't get to quit now. You promised Emma you'd be home for Christmas. You're going to keep that promise." Sarah tried to respond, but darkness was closing in. The last thing she saw was Tom's face, etched with concern, before unconsciousness claimed her. She woke to the rhythmic thump of helicopter rotors and the smell of aviation fuel. She was on a medevac bird, Tom sitting beside her, holding her hand. A combat medic was working on her, adjusting 4 bags, monitoring her vitals. Welcome back, Tom said, relief evident in his voice. You scared the hell out of us. Sarah tried to speak, but Tom shook his head. Don't talk. Save your strength. We're 20 minutes out from Bagram. They've got a surgical team standing by. But Sarah needed to know. The team. Everyone made it out. Thanks to you. You bought us the time we needed. Tom's voice was thick with emotion. You crazy, brave, incredible idiot. You almost died holding that position. Worth it, Sarah whispered. Tom squeezed her hand. I disobeyed your order, you know. You told me not to come back. Court-martial you later, Sarah managed, the ghost of a smile on her cracked lips. I called in every favor I had. Tom continued. Got 2 Apache gunships and a full assault team. Took us all night to organize, but we weren't leaving you behind. That's not how SEAL teams work. Sarah's eyes were closing again. The medic had given her something for the pain, and it was pulling her under. But before the darkness took her, she heard Tom's voice one more time. Sleep, Sarah. We've got you. You're going home. The next time Sarah woke, she was in a hospital bed. Not a field hospital, but a real medical facility. Clean white walls, the beep of monitors, the smell of antiseptic. Bagram Air Base, she realized. She had made it. A nurse noticed she was awake and immediately pressed a call button. Within minutes, a doctor was at her bedside, checking her vitals, shining a light in her eyes. Welcome back, Lieutenant, the doctor said. She was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and graying hair. I'm Dr. Patterson. You've been out for about 18 hours. We had to do some surgery to repair damage to your arm and remove shrapnel. You also had 3 broken ribs, severe hypothermia, and significant blood loss. But you're going to make a full recovery. How long until I can return to duty? Sarah asked, her voice still hoarse. Dr. Patterson smiled. Let's focus on getting you stable first. But if you're asking when you can fly home, I'd say we can have you on a transport within 48 hours. Home. The word hit Sarah like a physical thing. She was going home. She was going to see Emma. What's today's date? Sarah asked suddenly. The doctor checked her chart. December 19th. 6 days until Christmas. Sarah would make it. She would keep her promise to Emma. Over the next 2 days, Sarah's condition improved rapidly. The fever from her infection broke, her strength returned, and the pain became manageable. Tom visited daily, bringing news from the team and the outside world. The mission had been a success. The intelligence Sarah's team had gathered, combined with the firefight at the compound, had led to a major operation that neutralized the wolf and his entire network. The attack they had been planning would never happen. Lives had been saved. They're talking about putting you in for a silver star, Tom mentioned during one visit. What you did, holding that position, buying time for the team, that was above and beyond. Sarah shook her head. I don't want a medal. I just want to go home to my daughter. You'll get both, Tom said firmly. You earned it, Mitchell. Don't diminish what you did. You saved 7 lives that night, including mine. On the afternoon of December 20th, Sarah was cleared to travel. She was loaded onto a C-17 transport bound for Germany, where she would transfer to a flight headed stateside. The flight was long and uncomfortable despite the pain medication, but Sarah didn't care. Every mile brought her closer to Emma. At Ramstein Air Base in Germany, there was a 6-hour layover. Sarah used the time to call her ex-husband. The phone rang 3 times before he picked up. Hello. Dan, it's Sarah. There was a pause. Then, relief flooded his voice. Sarah, thank God. The Navy called, said you'd been injured, but we're stable. Are you okay? I'm fine. Banged up, but I'll heal. Listen, I'm on my way home. I'll land at Dover on the 23rd. Can you have Emma there? Of course. She's going to be so excited. She's been worried sick since we got the call. I didn't tell her how serious it was, just that you'd been hurt. Thank you, Sarah said, meaning it. Despite their divorce, Dan had always been a good father. How is she? Missing her mom. She made you a Christmas present. Been working on it for weeks. Won't let me see it. Sarah felt tears prickling her eyes. Tell her I love her. Tell her I'm coming home. I will. Sarah, Dan's voice was serious now. Whatever happened over there, I'm glad you're okay. Emma needs her mother. After the call, Sarah sat in the USO lounge at Ramstein, watching planes take off and land. Other soldiers were scattered around the room, all in various states of transit, all heading home or to their next deployment. It was a strange limbo. This place between war and peace. A young army specialist sat down near Sarah, his arm in a sling. He couldn't have been more than 22. He noticed Sarah's purple heart on her uniform blouse and nodded respectfully. Rough deployment, ma'am? Sarah nodded. You could say that. You. ID got our convoy. I was lucky. 2 of my buddies weren't. His eyes were haunted, carrying the weight that all combat veterans knew too well. Sarah understood that look. She had seen it in the mirror too many times. I'm sorry for your loss, she said quietly. It never gets easier, losing people. The young specialist nodded. How do you deal with it? The guilt of surviving when others didn't. It was a question Sarah had asked herself countless times over her 12 years of service. She had lost friends, teammates, people she considered family. Each loss left a scar, and some days the weight of those scars felt unbearable. You honor them by living well, Sarah finally said. By being the best version of yourself. By doing good in the world. They didn't get the chance to come home, but you did. Make it count. The specialist considered this, then nodded slowly. Thank you, ma'am. That helps. After he left, Sarah sat alone with her thoughts. She thought about the men she had killed in that cave and on the mountain. She didn't know their names, didn't know if they had families waiting for them. In the heat of combat, they had been targets, threats to be eliminated. But now, in the quiet reflection of the USO lounge, they were human again. War was complicated. Sarah had signed up to defend her country, to protect innocent people from those who would do them harm. But every shot fired, every life taken, carried a weight. She believed in what she was doing, believed in the mission. But that didn't make it easy. Her flight to Dover was called, and Sarah boarded with a mix of wounded soldiers and routine passengers. She found her seat and settled in for the long flight across the Atlantic. Sleep came easier this time, her body finally, believing it was safe enough to rest. She dreamed of Emma, not the nightmares that usually plagued her sleep, but good dreams. Emma's laughter, the way she wrinkled her nose when she was thinking hard about something, the feel of her small hand in Sarah's. The dreams were a gift, a promise of what waited for her on the other side of this flight. Sarah woke as the plane began its descent into Dover Air Force Base. Through the window, she could see the Delaware countryside, covered in a light dusting of snow. Christmas lights were visible on houses below, twinkling in the gathering dusk. It looked like a Norman Rockwell painting, peaceful and perfect. The plane landed smoothly, and Sarah felt a surge of emotion as the wheels touched American soil. She was home. After months of deployment, after nearly dying in an Afghan cave, she was finally home. The processing at Dover took several hours. Medical checks, paperwork, debriefing. Sarah went through it all with patience born of long experience. She knew the drill. But every minute felt like an hour, knowing Emma was somewhere on the other side of all this bureaucracy. Finally, she was cleared. A Navy lieutenant escorted her to the visitors area, where families waited for their returning soldiers. Sarah's heart was pounding as she walked through the double doors. The room was crowded with people, balloons, signs welcoming troops home. Sarah scanned the crowd, looking for a familiar face, and then she heard it. Mommy! Emma broke free from Dan's hand and ran across the room. Sarah dropped to her knees, ignoring the lance of pain from her broken ribs, and caught her daughter in her arms. Emma crashed into her, wrapping her arms around Sarah's neck so tight it was hard to breathe. But Sarah didn't care. This was what she had fought for, what she had nearly died for. This moment right here. Hi, baby, Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. I missed you so much. I missed you too, Emma sobbed. They said you got hurt. Are you okay? I'm okay now, Sarah assured her, pulling back to look at her daughter's face. Emma had grown in the months Sarah had been deployed. Her face had lost some of its baby roundness, and she seemed taller. Look at you. You're getting so big. I'm almost 10 now, Emma said proudly. Then, her face crumpled again. I thought you weren't coming home. I thought something bad happened. Something bad did happen, Sarah said honestly. She had always tried to be truthful with Emma, age-appropriately. But I'm tough, remember? Like you. We're both fighters. Dan approached, giving Sarah space, but offering a warm smile. Welcome home, Sarah. You look good considering. His eyes flicked to the bandage on her arm, the way she was favoring her left side. Thanks for bringing her, Sarah said, standing slowly with Emma still clinging to her. Of course. Listen, I know we were supposed to split the holidays, but under the circumstances, why don't you keep her through New Year's? She needs time with her mom. Sarah was surprised by the generosity. Are you sure? Absolutely. You two need this. Dan ruffled Emma's hair affectionately. Besides, I can tell someone's been working on a secret present for weeks. She'll want to be there when you open it. Emma's eyes lit up. You're going to love it, Mommy. I made it all by myself. After saying goodbye to Dan, Sarah and Emma made the drive to Sarah's small apartment in Virginia Beach. It was modest, a two-bedroom place near the base, but it was home. Emma chattered the entire drive, filling Sarah in on everything that had happened while she was deployed. School projects, friends drama, the Christmas pageant she had been in where she played a wise man. I wanted to be Mary, Emma confided. But Mrs. Henderson said I was too good at remembering lines, so I should be a wise man because they have the most to say. Sarah smiled, listening to her daughter's voice wash over her like music. This was real. This was what mattered. Not medals or commendations, not the body count or the mission success. This, her daughter's happiness, her safety, her innocence. At the apartment, Sarah's neighbor Mrs. Chun had left a care package. Fresh groceries, a plate of homemade cookies, and a note welcoming Sarah home. Sarah made a mental note to thank her properly later. For now, she just wanted time with Emma. They ordered pizza and watched Christmas movies, curled up together on the couch. Emma fell asleep halfway through Elf, her head on Sarah's shoulder. Sarah didn't move, content to just sit there holding her daughter, feeling her breathe, solid and real and safe. The next 2 days passed in a blur of catching up. Sarah tried to do normal activities despite her injuries. They went Christmas shopping, decorated Sarah's apartment with lights and a small tree, baked cookies that turned out lopsided but delicious. Sarah moved slowly, her ribs protesting every movement, but she pushed through. She had missed too many moments with Emma already. She wouldn't miss these. On Christmas Eve, they attended the base chapel's candlelight service. Sarah wasn't particularly religious, but there was something comforting about the ritual, the community of service members, and their families coming together. They sang carols, and Emma's clear voice beside her brought tears to Sarah's eyes. That night, after Emma went to bed, Sarah sat alone in the living room, looking at the Christmas tree lights. She thought about the men in her team, scattered across the country with their own families. She thought about the soldiers still deployed, spending Christmas in Afghanistan or Iraq or Syria. She thought about the families with empty chairs at their tables, loved ones who wouldn't be coming home for Christmas or any other day. Sarah had been incredibly lucky. She had survived when she shouldn't have. She was home when she had been certain she would die in that cave. It felt like borrowed time, like a gift she didn't quite deserve. Her phone buzzed with a text. It was from Tom. "Merry Christmas, Mitchell. Glad you made it home. You earned this." Sarah texted back, "Merry Christmas, Commander. Thank the team for me. For everything." Within minutes, her phone was lighting up with messages from the rest of the team. Jake, Marcus, and the others, all wishing her well, all expressing relief that she had survived. These men were her brothers in every way that mattered. They had risked everything to come back for her. That kind of bond couldn't be broken. Christmas morning arrived with Emma bouncing on Sarah's bed at 6 a.m., too excited to sleep any longer. Sarah groaned, but couldn't help smiling at her daughter's enthusiasm. They went to the living room, and Emma immediately grabbed a wrapped package from under the tree. "This one first," Emma insisted. "I made it for you." Sarah carefully unwrapped the present, mindful of Emma's eager watching. Inside was a handmade scrapbook. The cover was decorated with Emma's artwork, stars and stripes and hearts. Inside, Emma had filled it with drawings, photos, and letters she had written to Sarah during the deployment. Each page was a window into Emma's heart. Drawings of the two of them together. Photos from better times. Letters that ranged from describing her day to expressing how much she missed her mom. On the last page, Emma had written in her careful handwriting, "My mom is a hero. She keeps people safe. I'm proud of her even when I miss her." Sarah couldn't stop the tears this time. She pulled Emma close, holding her tight. "This is the most beautiful present anyone's ever given me. Thank you, baby." They spent the morning opening presents, eating cinnamon rolls, and watching the snow that had started falling overnight. It was perfect. It was everything Sarah had dreamed of during those long, cold hours in the Afghan cave. In the afternoon, Sarah's phone rang. It was an unknown number, but she answered anyway. Lieutenant Mitchell? This is Admiral Harrison. I wanted to call personally to welcome you home and congratulate you on an exceptional mission. Sarah straightened unconsciously, even though the Admiral couldn't see her. Thank you, sir. I've reviewed your actions during the extraction. Holding that position alone, under those circumstances, with your injuries. That took extraordinary courage. The Silver Star recommendation has my full support. I appreciate that, sir. But I was just doing my job. We both know it was more than that. The Admiral's voice was kind but firm. You saved your team, Mitchell. Own it. Be proud of it. And when the ceremony happens, I'll be there to pin that medal on your chest myself. After the call, Sarah sat quietly, processing. She had been trained to be humble, to downplay her actions, to focus on the team rather than individual glory. But maybe the Admiral was right. Maybe she needed to acknowledge what she had done, not for ego's sake, but to honor the sacrifice and the risk. Emma appeared at her side. Who was that? Work stuff? Sarah said, then reconsidered. Emma deserved honesty. Actually, it was an admiral. He called to say I did a good job on my last mission. The one where you got hurt. Yeah, that one. Emma was quiet for a moment, processing. Was it scary? Sarah could have lied, could have minimized it. But she chose truth. Yes, it was very scary. There were times I didn't think I would make it home. But you did, Emma said with the simple confidence of a child. Because you're strong and brave. I came home because I had something worth fighting for, Sarah corrected gently, touching Emma's nose. I promised you I'd be here for Christmas, and I don't break my promises. Emma hugged her tightly. I'm glad you're home, Mommy. That evening, as snow continued to fall outside, Sarah made hot chocolate while Emma put together a new puzzle. The apartment was warm and cozy, filled with the smell of cinnamon and chocolate. Christmas music played softly on the radio. This was peace. After the violence and chaos of war, this was what peace felt like. Ordinary moments that were actually extraordinary because they were shared with someone you loved. Sarah thought about the path that had led her here. Joining the Navy at 19, determined to prove herself. The years of training, pushing her body and mind to their limits. The deployments, the missions, the friendships forged in fire. The marriage that couldn't survive the strain of constant deployments. The guilt of missing so much of Emma's childhood. Had it been worth it? That was a question Sarah had wrestled with many times. Tonight, watching Emma laugh as she tried to find puzzle pieces, Sarah thought maybe it had been. Not because of the missions or the medals, but because of what she had protected. Emma could laugh and play and be a kid because people like Sarah stood watch. That had to mean something. The week between Christmas and New Year's passed too quickly. Sarah and Emma fell into an easy routine. Mornings were lazy, with late breakfasts and cartoons. Afternoons meant building snowmen in the small park near their apartment, or visiting the Virginia Beach Aquarium, or just reading books together on the couch. Evenings were for cooking dinner together, teaching Emma the recipes Sarah's own mother had taught her years ago. Sarah's body was healing. The wound on her arm was closing nicely, and her ribs hurt less each day. But the real healing was happening inside, in the parts of her that combat had fractured. Being with Emma, hearing her laugh, seeing her safe and happy, that was the medicine Sarah needed most. On December 28th, Sarah received a call from Commander Tom Brennan. The team was gathering for an informal debrief and reunion at a restaurant in Norfolk. Would Sarah be able to make it? Sarah looked at Emma, who was coloring at the kitchen table. Can I bring someone? Family's always welcome, Tom assured her. That evening, Sarah and Emma drove to Norfolk. The restaurant was a local place popular with military families, known for its seafood and relaxed atmosphere. Sarah spotted her team at a large table in the back. They stood as she approached, and the greeting was warm and genuine. The prodigal sniper returns, Jake said with a grin, pulling Sarah into a careful hug that minded her injuries. Looking better than the last time I saw you. Low bar, Sarah replied with a smile. Jake, everyone, this is my daughter Emma. Emma suddenly became shy, partially hiding behind Sarah's leg as 7 large, intimidating Navy SEALs looked at her with undisguised curiosity and warmth. Marcus crouched down to Emma's level. Your mom is the toughest person I know. You should be really proud of her. Emma nodded, peeking out at him. I am. The team made space for them at the table, and Emma quickly warmed up as the SEALs went out of their way to make her feel included. They told silly stories, performed magic tricks with quarters, and generally acted more like favorite uncles than hardened combat operators. Tom pulled Sarah aside while the others entertained Emma. How are you really doing? He asked quietly. Not the official answer. The real one. Sarah considered the question. I have nightmares. Sometimes I wake up and I'm back in that cave, hearing them outside, knowing they're coming. But then I look over and see Emma sleeping in the next room, and I remember why I fought so hard to survive. That's normal, Tom said. Have you talked to anyone? A counselor. I have an appointment at the VA next week. I'm not going to let it fester. I've seen too many guys try to tough it out and fall apart later. Tom nodded approvingly. Good. And for what it's worth, you saved all our lives that night. We all know it. If you hadn't held that position, hadn't bought us that time, we wouldn't have made it to the extraction point. Sarah felt uncomfortable with the praise, but she forced herself to accept it. We're a team. That's what teams do. Yeah, but most teams don't have someone willing to sacrifice themselves for everyone else. That's special, Mitchell. That's what makes you an exceptional operator. The evening continued with good food and better company. Sarah watched Emma interact with her team, saw the way these dangerous men became gentle and kind around a 9-year-old girl. It struck her that this was what they were all fighting for. Not for abstract concepts like freedom or democracy, though those mattered, but for this, for children to be safe, to laugh, to grow up in a world where their biggest worry was finishing their homework or what toy they wanted for their birthday. As they were leaving, Jake pulled Sarah aside. Hey, I know you're on medical leave for a few more weeks, but when you're cleared, there's talk of the team deploying again. Different mission, different location. I wanted you to hear it from me first. Sarah's stomach dropped. She had known this was coming. Deployments were the reality of military life. But the thought of leaving Emma again, of going back into danger so soon after nearly dying, made her feel sick. When? She asked. February, probably. Nothing's confirmed yet. Commander wanted to give you a heads up. Sarah nodded slowly. Thanks for telling me. In the car on the way home, Emma was quiet. She had been chatty all evening, but now she stared out the window at the passing streetlights. What's on your mind, baby? Sarah asked. Are you going to leave again? To go back to war? Sarah had been dreading this question. Eventually, yes. That's my job. But you almost died this time. Emma's voice was small, scared. What if next time you don't come home? Sarah pulled the car over into a parking lot. She turned to face Emma fully, taking her small hands in her own. Emma, I can't promise that nothing will ever happen to me. That wouldn't be fair to you. My job is dangerous. But I can promise that I will always do everything in my power to come home to you. And I can promise that I believe in what I'm doing. I'm helping protect people who can't protect themselves. But what about me? Emma's eyes were filling with tears. Who protects me when you're gone? The question hit Sarah like a physical blow. It was the question she had been avoiding, the guilt she carried like a weight. How could she protect others when her own daughter felt unprotected? You're right, Sarah said quietly. And I've been thinking about that a lot. I've been in the Navy for 12 years. I've done my part, served my country. Maybe it's time to think about what comes next. For both of us. You mean quit? Emma's eyes widened. Not quit, just transition. There are other ways I can serve that don't mean deploying for months at a time. Training positions, intelligence work. I could still be in the Navy, but be home more. Would you like that? Emma threw her arms around Sarah's neck. Yes, I want you home. I don't want to worry about you all the time. Sarah held her daughter close, making a decision that had been forming in her mind since she woke up in that hospital in Bagram. Her time as an operator was coming to an end. She had given enough, sacrificed enough. Now it was time to give Emma what she deserved, a mother who came home every night. The next day, Sarah called Tom and requested a meeting. They met at a coffee shop near the base, and Sarah laid out her decision. I'm not deploying in February, she said. And I'm putting in for a transfer to a training position. I want to stay local, stay with Emma. I can't keep doing this to her, Tom. She's 9 years old, and She's terrified every time I leave that I won't come back. After what happened in Afghanistan, I can't tell her she's wrong to worry." Tom listened without interrupting. When Sarah finished, he nodded slowly. "I can't say I'm surprised. And I can't blame you. You've earned the right to make this call. You've served with distinction, and you've got nothing left to prove." "I feel guilty," Sarah admitted. "Like I'm abandoning the team, abandoning the mission." "Don't," Tom said firmly. "You've given 12 years, and you almost gave your life. Your daughter needs you more than the Navy does. And honestly, you'll probably do more good training the next generation than you would on one more deployment." The relief Sarah felt was immediate and profound. She had been carrying the weight of this decision, worried about how it would be received, worried that she would be seen as weak or uncommitted. But Tom's support meant everything. "There's something else," Tom continued. "The Silver Star ceremony is scheduled for mid-January. Admiral Harrison will be presenting it. Your family can attend if you want." "Emma will be there," Sarah said. "She needs to see this, needs to understand what I was fighting for." The weeks leading up to the ceremony were busy. Sarah filled out paperwork for her transfer request, underwent medical evaluations, and began the process of transitioning from operator to instructor. It felt strange, letting go of this identity she had carried for so long. But it also felt right. Emma helped Sarah prepare her dress uniform for the ceremony, carefully polishing the brass buttons until they gleamed. She asked questions about each ribbon and medal, and Sarah explained them all. The National Defense Service Medal for entering service during wartime, the Afghanistan Campaign Medal, the Combat Action Ribbon. Each one represented a piece of Sarah's service, a chapter of her life. On the day of the ceremony, Sarah stood in front of the mirror in her dress blues. The uniform was crisp, perfect. Emma stood beside her, wearing a new dress they had picked out together specifically for this occasion. "You look beautiful, Mommy," Emma said. "You do too, baby." Sarah adjusted Emma's collar. "Are you ready for this?" Emma nodded seriously. "I want to see you get your medal." Mrs. Henderson said medals are given to heroes, and you're my hero. Sarah's eyes misted. "You're mine too, Emma. Don't ever forget that." The ceremony was held at the base auditorium, and it was more formal than Sarah had expected. The room was filled with military personnel, families, and press. Sarah hadn't realized the media would be there until she saw the cameras. Apparently, her story had made news. Female Navy SEAL holding off Taliban fighters alone. It made for good headlines. Sarah stood at attention as Admiral Harrison approached. Tom and the rest of the team were there, along with dozens of other service members. But Sarah's eyes found Emma in the front row, watching with wide eyes. Admiral Harrison began the citation, his voice carrying through the auditorium. "The President of the United States takes pleasure in presenting the Silver Star Medal to Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, United States Navy, for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action against enemy forces while serving with a Naval Special Warfare Task Unit in support of Operation Enduring Freedom." The citation went on to describe the mission, Sarah's actions holding the position, the number of enemy fighters she had engaged. It sounded heroic when put into formal language, but Sarah remembered the reality. The cold, the fear, the certainty that she was going to die. She had done what needed to be done, nothing more. Admiral Harrison pinned the medal to Sarah's uniform, then stepped back and saluted. Sarah returned the salute crisply. Then the room erupted in applause. Sarah turned to see Emma on her feet, clapping so hard her hands must have hurt, tears streaming down her face. After the ceremony, there was a reception. Sarah was congratulated by dozens of people, many of whom she didn't know. She smiled, shook hands, accepted their thanks graciously. But her focus was on Emma, who stayed close to her side. A reporter approached, asking for an interview. Sarah agreed, but only if they kept Emma out of it. The reporter nodded and began asking questions. "Lieutenant Mitchell, what was going through your mind when you volunteered to hold that position alone?" Sarah thought carefully before answering. "I wasn't thinking about medals or recognition. I was thinking about my team, about getting them home safely to their families. And I was thinking about my daughter, about the promise I made to be home for Christmas." "Were you afraid you wouldn't make it out?" "I knew the odds weren't good," Sarah admitted. "But I've been trained to function under pressure, to make the hard calls. That's what operators do. We assess the situation and we do what needs to be done. What's next for you?" Sarah glanced at Emma, who was watching the interview with interest. I'm transitioning to a training position. I want to pass on what I've learned to the next generation of warriors. And I want to be home for my daughter. She's sacrificed enough for my career. It's time I gave back to her. The reporter nodded, clearly moved by the answer. Thank you for your service, Lieutenant. And thank you for sharing your story. After the reporter left, Dan approached. Sarah was surprised to see him. She hadn't told him about the ceremony, not wanting to make things awkward. I hope you don't mind me coming, Dan said. Emma called and told me about it. I wanted to be here. I'm glad you came, Sarah said, and she meant it. Whatever had happened between them, Dan was still Emma's father, and he had always supported Sarah's career even when it cost him their marriage. What you did over there, Dan continued, his voice thick with emotion. I can't imagine the courage that took. Emma's lucky to have you as her mother. I'm the lucky one, Sarah replied, watching Emma talk animatedly with Tom and the team. She's the reason I fought so hard to survive. Dan nodded. I know transitioning to a training role isn't easy for you. You've always been someone who leads from the front. But Emma needs you, Sarah. And you've earned the right to put her first. They stood together, watching their daughter. She was laughing at something Jake was saying, completely at ease with these dangerous men who had helped save her mother's life. That evening, back at the apartment, Emma asked Sarah to tell her the whole story of what happened in Afghanistan. Not the sanitized version, but the real one. Sarah hesitated, not sure how much a 9-year-old should hear. But Emma deserved the truth, or as much of it as she could handle. Sarah told her about the mission, about watching the compound, about when they were discovered. She told her about making the decision to stay behind, about holding the cave against impossible odds. She didn't go into graphic detail about the violence, but she didn't shy away from the reality either. Were you scared? Emma asked. Terrified, Sarah admitted. But I focused on what I was fighting for. You. Coming home to you. That's what kept me going when I wanted to give up. Emma was quiet for a long moment. I understand why you do it, Mommy. Your job. I understand why it's important. But I'm glad you're going to be home more now. Me too, baby. Me too. In the weeks that followed, Sarah officially transferred to the Naval Special Warfare Training Center as an instructor. Her first class of students were eager young operators preparing for deployment. Looking at them, Sarah saw herself at their age. Confident, fearless, ready to take on the world. Her job now was to make sure they were as prepared as possible. She taught them everything she had learned over 12 years of service. Not just tactics and marksmanship, but the mental toughness needed to survive. The importance of teamwork, the weight of the decisions they would have to make. She also told them about the cost, about the nightmares, the guilt, the relationships that couldn't survive the strain, about the brothers in arms lost to combat or suicide. She wanted them to go into this with their eyes open, understanding both the honor and the burden of service. One evening, a young female student approached Sarah after class. Ma'am, can I ask you something? Of course. How do you balance it? Being a mother and being an operator? I'm thinking about having kids someday, but I don't know if I can do both. Sarah thought about her answer carefully. I won't lie to you. It's hard. Harder than any mission I've ever been on. You miss birthdays, school plays, first steps. You carry guilt that weighs more than any ruck. But you also give your children something precious. You show them what it means to serve something bigger than yourself. You show them strength and courage and commitment. Do you regret it? The time you missed with your daughter? Every single day, Sarah said honestly. But I also know that the work we do matters. We keep people safe. We give children around the world a chance to grow up without fear. That has value. You just have to decide what balance works for you. For me, I gave 12 years to active operations. Now I'm giving my time to training and to my daughter. There's no right answer, only what's right for you. The student nodded, clearly processing this. Thank you, ma'am. That helps. As Sarah walked to her car that evening, she thought about how much had changed since that night in the Afghan mountains. She had faced death and survived. She had been tested in ways she never imagined and had found strength she didn't know she possessed. But, more importantly, she had found clarity about what truly mattered. At home, Emma was waiting with homework that needed help and stories about her day at school. They made dinner together, laughing as Emma tried to flip a pancake and missed the pan entirely. They curled up on the couch and watched a movie, Emma's head on Sarah's shoulder. This was the mission that mattered now. Being present, being whole, being the mother Emma deserved. Sarah had proven herself in combat, had earned her place among warriors. But her greatest battle had always been here, figuring out how to balance duty with love, service with family. Outside, snow began to fall again, covering the ground in white. Inside, the apartment was warm and filled with laughter. Sarah Mitchell was home, truly home, for the first time in 12 years. The sniper who had held off 30 Taliban fighters alone had finally found peace. She had kept her promise. She had made it home for Christmas. And she planned to be there for every Christmas to come, creating new memories, building a life with her daughter that was about more than just surviving, but truly living. The silver star sat in a place of honor on the shelf, gleaming in the lamplight. It represented courage and sacrifice, honor and duty. But the Real treasure was sitting beside her, a 9-year-old girl who had waited patiently and faithfully for her mother to come home. Sarah had been a warrior, a protector, a guardian standing watch over the innocent. She would always be those things in some way. But now, first and foremost, she was simply mom. And that was the most important mission of all.